Sean Arnold, and hey, have you heard about the September 17 Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Unlimited ban list changes? This one was just announced not very long ago, and as someone who has recently returned to the game and has been trying to get in competitively, I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions with the new cards and changes to the list. We're going to get through this quite quickly, and then I'll give my overall thoughts on the list altogether. The first card which we have hitting the forbidden list is Samsara Lotus. Samsara Lotus is a level 1 dark plant based card. If you don't know Samsara Lotus, it was mostly used as part of an OTK, using that, I believe, a link monster named Catbat something. I never really saw it personally. The problem with this card is that it has a revival effect which allows it to be special summoned during the end phase, and it wasn't restricted to once per turn, so I think you could just loop and hit your opponent again and again with this card's effect. It was broken stuff, so I'm glad to see anything like that leave the game. Something which also will be, I think, cheered and people will like quite a lot is the banning of Nightmare Goblin. Very surprised to see a card so recently released actually hitting the ban list, but Gokis particularly were making very good use of this card because they could lock out your opponent through extra link mechanic. By doing so, they will be able to make it so that you couldn't special summon any monsters from your extra deck, and Goblin was a main card for that. Overall, I think this is a shame because I just bought my copy of Goblin, but you know what, I'm fine with it going. I don't play Goki myself, so you know, it's not going to hurt me too much. I think reducing the chance of people being hit by the extra link mechanics so quickly is a bit good for the game, so you know, I'm fine with Goblin going. Then we also have MX Saber Invoker. This one I'm really actually kind of disappointed to see go. MX Saber Invoker was a brilliant card. It wasn't a amazing card, it was just a kind of a combo opener, and it was particularly used in Goki decks to kind of set up their crazy plays by searching out monsters from their deck to the field. But Konami has decided to ban this one instead of actually hitting the Goki cards himself, so you know, it's a shame to see such a generic card go. I use this card many times, particularly in things like Madolche, but you know, I think a lot of people won't mind this going too much. It's just a shame. I don't know any other real big strategies that rely on MX Saber Invoker besides maybe Madolche and Goki, so anyone who's not really playing those probably isn't going to worry about this one too much. Moving on to the forbidden list now, we have copies of one now. We have A Assault Core. I don't get this one. ABCs were definitely a dominant deck in their time, in their heyday, but that time is definitely long gone. So I'm not quite sure why Konami decided to put this onto the limited list now. ABCs are currently, I would say, a tier 1, maybe tier 1.5 style deck. They can't really keep up with the current meta of top level decks, but they are still a very powerful archetype. What's a big shame about this is that ABCs are a good introduction for beginners that are returning to the game. Not only are they a nostalgia archetype, but they're also quite cheap. You can get 3 copies of the ABC structure deck, and you can kind of almost build something which is, relatively speaking, fairly competitive, because ABC Buster Dragon is just so damn good. So hitting Assault Core itself, I'm not really too sure why this is there, but you know, it's just Konami gonna Konami. Speaking of Konami gonna Konami, I think everyone's gonna be ranting and raving about this one. He's back. My nigga Stratos is free at last. Thank God Almighty, he's free at last. Crazy that this took so long to happen, because Stratos was banned ages ago, and he's been a card which really didn't need to be on the forbidden list for such a long time now. Even now, his return isn't going to really make or break hero decks, but it's going to help. I don't think you're going to see a lot of people playing it, but because of a change later on, but still, it's not going to really make hero decks jump from being, say, tier 2 to tier 1 in overnight or anything. Especially the second effect, or the first effect of Stratos, which allows you to destroy spell and trap cards on the field. It's a nice deck, it's a nice effect, it's a nice option, but not really something which is going to be too effective in this day and age. But it's nice to see Stratos back. I think a lot of people are going to be happy with this. Go and get your copies now because it's going to shoot up in price, I guarantee it. Speaking of shooting up in price, I definitely say go and get yourself a Morphing Jar right now. Morphing Jar and Card Destruction are finally off the limited list or the forbidden list. They are back at 1. I don't know what Konami's doing with this one. I think this is kind of crazy. Morphing Jar is an incredibly powerful card as well as Card Destruction. These cards are going to allow players to mill their hands into their graveyards at incredible speeds. Burning Abyss is going to love having this card around, particularly Card Destruction as well. Morphing Jar is slow because it's a flip effect and no one really uses flip effects anymore except for maybe Subterrors. But still, the ability to draw 5 cards after discarding your entire hand is stupidly powerful. You're going to see some crazy combos with this one, I guarantee you. Sky Strikers are going to love this because you're going to mill spells into the graveyard. Burning Abyss, I mentioned already, are going to mill their cards into the graveyard, then draw 5 and just play for advantage. I think even Trickstars can benefit from this quite a bit. It's insane. It's insane to see Morphing Jar back. I'm definitely going to be experimenting with this one and Card Destruction quite a bit. So I definitely recommend people go and get a copy of this now because it could be a game changer. Speaking of game changers, we have a Hero Lives. It's been limited to 1. I don't get this. A Hero Lives is a great card. It's a nice card for elemental heroes or masked heroes. It's not so much a card that you need multiple copies of. It's still okay and it's still going to be used at 1, but it just helped the consistency of the deck quite a bit. It's kind of like Pot of Duality in a way for other decks which are much slower. A Hero Lives will allow a elemental hero monster be summoned from the deck, and normally people will go for Shadow Mist, but there's also the newer hero which people could go for as well. This being here I don't really get, because elemental heroes aren't necessarily one of the strongest decks right now, and with things like Trickstars running around, paying half your life points is kind of risky because you can get burned out quite easily because they do so much damage quite quickly. Don't get it personally, but I guess the trade-off is that, hey, you got Stratos back, so you know they're taking away one thing. So I don't agree with it, but we'll see how that pans out. Speaking of which, we also now have Sky Striker Mecha Hornet Drones limited to 1. This I'm happy with because Hornet Drones is one of the best opening plays right now. It is a free Link 1 summon into Kagari and then Shizuku and maybe even Hayate in some situations. You don't really need multiple copies of Hornet Drones in the Sky Striker engine, except for the fact that you want to draw it earlier on. Once you've got one that's active, you can kind of recycle it and use it again and again and again. But I think this card will still see a lot of play. But the main card, which really I think should have been hit, was Engage. So seeing this being hit instead of that, it's kind of like an eyebrow raiser to me. But we'll see how that affects. I don't think this is going to hurt Sky Strikers at all. I think they're still going to be one of the most consistent engines used out there because Engage is still around. And Engage is still currently going for more than 50 euros on card market. So I wish that was hit instead because it would have been helpful if it was a lot cheaper and easier to buy. Super Polymerization is back. This is going to be an interesting card. I think Invoked decks or Mech Knight Invoked decks are going to love this one. Super Polymerization is able to use a fusion summon between monsters on either side of the field. I think Alistair is going to get along with this card quite well. I'm sure there are other decks which can use this too, but that is the one that immediately comes to mind. It really reminds me of Invocation because Invocation can use cards from either player's graveyard to summon an invoked monster, and Super Polymerization can use cards from either side of the field. So Super Polymerization coming back is pretty strong, and I think Invoked is definitely going to love this quite a bit. So I would keep an eye out for that one. Speaking about keeping an eye out, Limited Removal is now at 2. Very peculiar. I'm not too sure about this. The reason why Limited Removal was banned in the first place was because it was so easy to OTK with it. I think back in the day, people used to OTK with this card with Jinzo. Like, stop your opponent from playing traps, play multiple copies of Limited Removal, and go for game. You can still kind of do that now, and with Sky Strikers being machine types mostly, this card is still quite viable. It can still do quite a lot of damage. The big thing with Limited Removal is that it doubles the attack of all machine type monsters on the field, but it doesn't double the original attack, it doubles their current attack. So if you use 2 in one turn, it's kind of like Honest in a way, and it will give you double the increase. So let's say you have, I don't know, let's say Kagari on the field, which has 1500 attack, you double it to 3k, and then double it again to 6k. And that's just Kagari with a measly 1500 attack. You can easily find a lot of cards which will make limit removal a lot more stronger. Instead of slowing the game down, it looks like Konami wants to speed things up and go for more FTKs, which, you know, kind of contradicts the fact that Samsara got banned. But who knows? We'll see if limit removal gets played a bit more. Scapegoat is at 2. I think that's totally fine. Scapegoat is the 1 card link box. It is really, really powerful. Having it at 2, I honestly don't think it's going to make much of a difference. The fact that everyone has to have it now at 2 is just going to mean everyone's just going to run it at 2. People will find something else to have that extra space for. I think having Scapegoat at 2 is perfectly fine. But yeah, I think it's fine. I don't really think people are going to cry too much about that one. Terraforming at 2, again, also is still okay, it's fine. Again, it's one of those cards which you want to see this as fast as possible. You want to get your important field spells before your opponent makes their plays. But if your opponent can't use Terraforming at 3 either, then you're not really at too much at a disadvantage for that. Things like, I forgot the name of the invoked field spell, magical something. And things like Trickstar, is it Light Stage? That really, really good opening searching cards. Those will really feel the effect of this, but having it at 2 isn't going to hurt those decks much. One card which I am very disappointed to see on this list is Called by the Grave. I love this card. This is my favorite tech card of the current format because it is one of the few consistent cards which you can use against hand traps, and that is only if you are going first. If you go first and you can play this card, you can shut down your opponent's hand traps like Droll Lockbird and Ash Blossom and so on and so forth. Seeing this go to 2 makes me really, really sad. This is very much a card you want to see in the early game. You want to see this as soon as possible. You want to shut down those graveyard effects. You want to shut down those hand traps. So seeing this limited to 2 kind of sucks because hand traps are so popularly played right now. To have even fewer counters against that really means that you're going to have to spend a lot of money if you want to play this game competitively to buy those $10 to $50 cards, which are €50 cards, which are way too expensive for a piece of cardboard. But I'm really sad about this one. This one is my biggest sadness for the list, but yeah, you know, we'll have to just kind of make do. Apocalyptic Towers is back at 3. I think this is fine to bring back. We've got so many boss monsters at the moment. When this was out, it was really hard to deal with, but nowadays it's fine. You can tribute over it, you can send it to the graveyard. Eater of Minions would no, we can't use Eater of Minions on this at all, but there are so many outs to this, and the fact that we have Link Summons now, this card has no immunity against Link Summons, so something like Nightmare Cerberus will be able to destroy this quite easily, and that card is quite generic. So it would be nice to see Clifford get stronger, because it's always good to have more diversity in a meta, but I think this is fine. I think this is perfectly balanced. It's nice to see this card back. This commander is at 3 again. This commander was recently edited. It used to be that you revive it from the graveyard to be able to draw 2. Now it's been changed to it cannot be a special summon from the turn it goes to the graveyard, and it can you can only use the effect once per duel. So I think you will see this card a lot. I think you will see it in hero decks. I think you're going to see this card be sent to the graveyard quite easily. It is a dark monster, so it is a dark lore target, and I think you're going to see things like having it sent to the graveyard through Foolish or something similar to that, and then having it revived later on. Not really too sure what they would use to revive it. Probably Monster Reborn, but it's easy enough to get a free easy draw 2 cards plus a fodder for Dark Lore. So nice card for hero decks. It helps them out quite a bit. It might even be generic. It might even be used elsewhere. I think you could probably use this in zombies and still get quite a bit out of that. Burial from a Different Dimension is back at 3. I think this is a really good idea. I think Burial from the Different Dimension, I personally think is actually really underused. I think this card is so good in Banish Pile from the Graveyard style decks. I think Burning Abyss will love Burial from a Different Dimension, but also with the brand new zombie cards on the horizon, which are coming out soon, this will be really good for those cards. Being able to send cards back from your Banish Pile back to your graveyard is a strong tool, just because you can reuse those effects again. I love Burial from a Different Dimension. I probably won't be experimenting with it too much, but I like it. I like this card a lot. And Ring of Destruction is back at 3. Ring of Destruction was edited a long time ago. It's now so you can't target a monster which has higher attack than your opponent's life points, so you can't kill your opponent with this card. I would like to see this card maybe used with Trickstars, so reduce your opponent's life points as much as possible and then kind of burn them away for game. But I think it's fine to bring this card back. Targeted removal really isn't so good nowadays, unless say you play a target removal which is going to win the game for you. So seeing this back at 3 is fine. Other cards which I missed back on the limited list in the extra deck are Heavy Metals Electromite. I think this is a real shame personally. I think this is kind of sad. Pendulums have had it rough, and there's very few pendulum decks which actually really are viable nowadays. So Electromite really helped them out quite a bit. Now having only one copy of Electromite, I think is going to hurt the deck a little bit. You'll still see things like Magician still being played, but having Electromite at 1 is kind of sad. It's a nice generic or nice easy to use searcher for pendulum monsters, so having it reduced down is kind of sad, but I think pendulum decks will still survive because poison magicians are very strong. Omega is now at 1. Omega at 1 is kind of finding a way. Omega isn't something normally people use more than one of, so normally people use more than one, just one of it. The only way I've been seeing people use multiple copies of this is in OCG zombie decks. Zombie decks have a really powerful engine, and having Omega in the graveyard is able to recycle those effects and bring them back to your hand or bring them back to your extra deck in most cases. So being able to recycle that Banish Power is really good. So Omega was really strong for that, but I don't really think this kind of is going to change too much for those decks, particularly with things like Burial from a Different Dimension, which is easier to use than Omega in some cases. I think those decks are still as powerful as they were. And the last card which is back, which I actually really like to see now, is Evilswarm Exeter Knight. Evilswarm Exeter Knight was a really strong card in the rank 4 era, particularly in the early stages of the rank 4 era, and it would destroy all cards on the field as part of a chain. This is really good. I actually think this is actually still quite viable. Mass removal in this day and age isn't really too good. Mass removal is kind of situational depending on what you're playing, especially if you are playing against an opponent which has cards that float. But Exeter Knight, I think it's perfectly fine to come back now, and if anyone can make use of it, I'll be glad to see that again. So this is the Forbidden Unlimited list. What are your thoughts on it? I think overall it's not going to really change the format for the rest of the year. I think we're going to have to wait till February or January for any real changes. I think the meta is still going to be Trickstar, Sky Strikers and Goki at the highest level with those stupid combos. I think I think definitely pick up copies of Draw and Lockbird if you haven't got them already, because if we start to see Morphing Jar and card destruction around or used more, then that card is definitely going to be even better than it was before. But we'll see as it comes along. What are your thoughts on the ban list? Thank you as always for tuning into the channel, and I'll see you soon. Take care.